thanks for coming along. I guess there's a few learners here, and I'm 71. So we're going to hear what Ryan's got to say. Some of us are already involved in other things. I was involved with World Volunteering in the climate change thing. It's coming back in September, but right now we've got some amazing information coming from Ryan Shaw. So, nice to have you, Ryan.
Let's kick it off here. It'll basically be a picture show. We don't do that for any other reason other than that's what keeps the concentration span down to a minimal drain. Quite clearly you can see that that first one is reasonably provocative. Julia Gillard was charged on January 29, 2007, which meant that was the day that she was presented to the Melbourne Magistrates Court. That charge has actually been concealed up until now by everybody. But unfortunately for the whole structure, it's all coming home to roost now. It should have gone to grand jury way back 4 years ago and got sorted. You're only about 6 weeks off making probably a fatal mistake in this country. And if you don't know what the government's got planned for you, the next hour or so will show you. Now that's the advertisement we attempted to place in the Courier Mail, but because Julia's picture came up and the name came up and the word treason came up, it took all day just to get a ad in the Courier Mail. And this is the ad they ran. So on one ad, it took all day, and the other one got cleared at about 6 o'clock in the evening. Otherwise, there was nothing in the paper at all. So, would you actually say that there's censorship of your media? And that's why we put it up there. Now, what we're going to do is just show you who what you call the principal players are of all of this. We've got the Queen, we've got the Governor-General, and we've got Julia Gillard. Now, that's in essence the order of authority today. The Queen in the UK, the Governor-General, and the current Prime Minister. That is the charge that was filed. As you can see at the top, it says charge and summons to the defendant. The defendant is Julia Gillard. That's when she was not the Prime Minister. And at the bottom, it's signed off by the Melbourne Magistrates Court. These are the words that's actually in the charge. On 1st of January 2004, the Government of West Australia, Perth, West Australia, inclusive of the executive, legislative and judicial arms, in agreement with the Commonwealth, did enact an overt act titled Acts Amendment and Repeal Courts and Legal Practice Act 2003. Now that's all what you call the legal jargon to get the words correct before the Melbourne Magistrates Court will sign it off. By such enactment, an act of treason was committed. Now treason being, in law, breach of allegiance. Such treason has been concealed by the defendant since the date of enactment up to and inclusive of the present. And by that I mean of the present, that's today. Now what is treason? And there's your legal definition. Because the average person thinks. Now what I want to say here is that this is an accusation. People can't be saying she's been charged with treason, therefore she's guilty, or whoever else is guilty. And that's not process of law. A criminal charge is only the beginning of a process. And the process must have its process. That's what's called due process. And if you're already declaring them guilty, you're absolutely, completely out of line. Treason consists of a breach of duty of allegiance which the subject owes to the sovereign and which binds him at all times and in all places. Now that's R versus Casement 1917, 1 King's Bench 98 at 114. That's only, I'm putting the citation there so any law student or whoever wants to go find it will find it. Now this is the State of Victoria Courts and Tribunals Legislation Further Amendment Act 2000. Now remembering the fact that I just put what treason is up on the board. Treason is breach of allegiance. Now the point I'm making here is at part 2 it says on the Legal Practice Act, it says oath of allegiance no longer required. Now I'm only a farmer, but if you've got a Commonwealth Constitution that requires an oath of allegiance, how can what you call a really lower act remove the oath of allegiance? I'm only a farmer. I'm not a lawyer. But to me, and then on the bottom right it says, takes an oath of office or makes an affirmation of office in the form required by the court. So what you've got there is that the oath of allegiance is removed from the Legal Practice Act in Victoria in September 5, 2000, which is ascended to September 5, 2000. But then they've let the court be the court that determines what should be the oath. That's then making the judicial arm a legislative arm. That's impossible. But it's also left the court sitting invalidly because the oath's gone. But who was the offender there? Clearly it was the officers of the court plus the Parliament of Victoria who introduced the bill or the act. Rob Holes, the Attorney General of Victoria. Who told him to do it? That's what the discovery of the trial is for. Who told Rob Holes to introduce that bill? State of Victoria, Western Australia, Acts Amendment and Repeal Courts and Legal Practice Act 2003. The Criminal Act. You have Section 121, the Bail Act. Section 122, the Children's Court Act. Now over in section on the right hand side, this is what it says. Schedule 1 is amended by the leading Sovereign Lady Queen Elizabeth II, her heirs and successors in the 2 places where it occurs, and in each place inserting instead the state of West Australia. Any one of you consent to that? Hey, please. If you don't understand what they're doing here, you're about to lose your country. Did they need to ask your permission to do that? Did they? Well, what are they doing here? Because if you don't wake up and within the next couple of weeks, you're going to have a document on your table, you're not going to turn back. They're about to slam dunk you. That's the District Court Act of Western Australia. Now, if you see down here at section 11 of it, where I've got the little mark, is amended by the leading Her Majesty and inserting instead the Governor. That's like sort of saying, you're the Governor, you are now the Majesty. No one asked us. So who did this shuffling of the deck chairs issue without the referendums or the consent? This is what you call the biggest coup you've ever seen in the country, and all done with a pen. And how did they get away with it with you Aussies? Because you went to sleep. You went to sleep. And if you stay asleep, you're going to lose your country. This is only what you call Part 8 of this Act. This Act's about a 200-odd page Act. But you'll see here, where I've got it marked, Section 9 is amended by the leading Her Majesty and inserting instead the Governor. Section 119 is amended by the leading to Her Majesty or any of her subjects. Hello, that means you and me. Gone. Somebody told them to do that. Or other persons entitled in like manner as subjects. Section 154 is amended by the leading Her Majesty and inserting instead the. And down at the bottom, the second schedule is amended by the leading Sovereign Lady Queen Elizabeth II, her heirs and successors, and inserting instead the state of West Australia. Now how can the state of West Australia usurp federation when federation is what created it? And that just shows who participated in the enactment, essentially the Governor and the Attorney General, Jim McGuinty. The Commonwealth of Australia Constitution Act 1900, Section 44. Julia Gillard is charged with treason with 54 others because of what those acts have done. Breached the allegiance. Now it says there, disqualification, any person who, at subsection 2, is attainted, that's subsection 1, It says is under acknowledgement or allegiance, obedience or adherence to a foreign power. Now what I'm saying, and I don't have to prove that, the onus of proof to me is, was the allegiance breached? I don't have to prove who's telling them to do it. I only have to prove, was the allegiance breached? Is it tainted of treason? That's subsection 2. That's this one. And down the bottom, it states this: shall be incapable of being chosen or of sitting as a senator or member of the House of Reps. There's your disqualification clause. Now what happens here? Dwell on that for a minute. Was Her Majesty taken out of West Australia? Well, how can the senators or House of Reps come out of West Australia in the next election and go and sit in the Parliament? Is that a fair question? Are you going to let that happen? Because if you let that happen, you've got a foreign power about to run your government. Because they've been sitting there illegally now for a fair while. And to be quite honest, I don't know where you Aussies have been. But some serious thing has gone wrong here. Now there's the two ladies who are in union to slam dunk you. And I say that graciously. That's your Australia Act, the Constitution, the Commonwealth. People would say whatever they want to say about it. If you let that document go off the table, you'll have a document you'll wish you never got. The Constitution of the Commonwealth of Australia, Chapter 2, the Executive Government. It says there, now when Quentin Bryce went to swear in Julia Gillard, she said, by authority vested in me under section 64 and 65 of the Commonwealth Constitution. Now that's section 64. The next section will be section 55. So she's used the Constitution purportedly to give her vesting power, and that's section 65. It's the Executive Government, Chapter 2. Look what happens in the next portion. Section 61 is the executive power of the Commonwealth is vested in the Queen and is exercisable by the Governor-General as the Queen's representative. Keep going. Look what happens in the next bit. Commonwealth of Australia Constitution Act, Section 42. Every senator and every member of the House of Representatives shall, before taking his seat, make and subscribe before the Governor-General or some person authorised by him an oath or affirmation of allegiance in the form set forth in the Schedule to the Constitution. So this section is binding them to the schedule. This is the schedule. There's your schedule affirmation. I, and in this case Julia Gillard, do solemnly and sincerely affirm and declare that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, her heirs and successors according to law. Now, look what happened in reality. Is that the oath that's in the Constitution? Is that the oath that is in the Constitution? Who's the offender? I'll ask quite specifically. Who is the offender? Both are. So she's looking at a treason charge of January 29, 2007, but as of June 21, 2010, here's a brand new one. Excuse the expression. Where did this oath come from? Because it's not the one that's in the Constitution. And when you swear an oath to serve the Commonwealth of Australia, that in essence is a corporation registered in the United States. Now, they've got some serious plan in progress here to make sure the Aussie doesn't come up for fresh air. I haven't got a clue what you're going to do about what you find in here, but if you don't do anything, you're going to lose your country. You're going to lose your law. I've categorically proved in 10 minutes something has gone wrong. Would you agree or disagree? And that's why I've laid the charges. Wouldn't have a clue. All I'm saying is, quite apart from that, is that's the one at the top is the one she should have taken. Irrespective of capital letters and whatever, the one at the bottom That's appeared